Welcome to Impact Farming, where we introduce you to the people and ideas that will have a massive impact on your farming operation. Brought to you by Farm Marketer. Sit down, start the engine, and let's roll with today's show.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Impact Farming Show. I'm so excited to have you guys back this week, and I am extremely excited to have our guest, Gerry Friesen, back for the third time. Welcome.
It's my pleasure, Tracy. Thank you.
I am always so happy to have you on our show and share your expertise with our audience. Gerry, for those of you that may have missed the previous episodes, Gerry is a conflict and stress management specialist.
Yeah.
How about you tell us a little bit more about who you are and what you do, and then we'll dive right in.
Sure, sounds good, Tracy. Just a brief synopsis. I grew up on a farm, a turkey farm actually, and grain farm. Took over the family farm together with my brother, expanded into hogs. That obviously went the wrong way, as a lot of hog farms did, as a lot of other farms have. In the 1990s, I was involved in agricultural politics, and then in 2000, I was actually appointed to the Manitoba Farm Mediation Board.
Okay.
And kind of found my calling in life, or at least that's what it felt like. And so I really enjoyed doing that work. I've dealt with 700 farm families who were experiencing financial problems. In 2007, we just finally quit the farm. Were able to sell it. We moved on. But then I came across an ad in the Manitoba Cooperator that the Manitoba Farm and Rural Stress Line were asking for volunteers.
Oh, wow.
And I thought, hey, that would probably be a good extension to the mediation work I was doing. So I took their training, actually became certified as a counselor. And so since then, my work has kind of been a combination of both the stress management, the mental health stuff that a lot of people deal with, as well as the conflict management work I do.
That's excellent. That is, you have big shoulders.
Well, it's work I enjoy doing. I find it interesting. I talk about, I took training to be a mediator. I took training to be a counselor. Most of the stuff that I talk about and help other people with is stuff I've experienced myself. Oh. So I'm self-taught, as it were.
The best kind of teachers.
Yeah, exactly.
Excellent. I am really excited, maybe a little nervous about this episode. Not nervous, so to speak, but I want to take that can of worms and open it right up. Today we are talking about farm-family conflict. And with this show, I like to talk about some of that hard stuff that is obviously there in so many farm-family operations, but we tend to ignore it, to brush it under the rug, and you know what? It doesn't help. So one of my missions with this show is bringing our audience the people and ideas that will impact their farming operation, which includes the farm family. And farm family conflict is absolutely massive. So are you ready for this?
Let's go.
Let's go? Okay. So because there's more than one type of relationship on the farm, different generations, we could probably do 10 episodes about this. Why don't we focus on one of the main ones, which would be the farm-family relationship between a parent and a child that farms together. Sound good to you?
That sounds good.
Okay.
But can I throw a disclaimer out here?
Yes.
There's a lot of family businesses, farms, or other businesses out there that are really successful.
Sure.
So when I make some of the statements I'm going to make today, or tell some of the stories I'm going to talk about, that's not a blanket statement for everybody.
Right.
It's more just, I very much like my education was self-taught. A lot of what I'm going to talk about are personal experiences for myself as a parent, but also as far as families that I've dealt with over the years. So just people are aware of the fact that, hey, there are a lot of successful family businesses out there.
That's so true. And you know what? Again, focusing on the positive, that's hard to do because we often hear about those negative situations. We hear about the family farms that fall apart because of conflict, right? We don't hear about Susie and Frank and their children who are farming amazingly and get along so well, because what the heck is there to talk about with that, right?
Exactly.
Okay, so taking that into consideration, I have heard you speak about this topic, and you hit the nail on the head, and you talk about the paradigm shift that needs to happen when parents farm with children.
Yeah.
Can you speak to that?
Sure, and it really hit me over the last year or so with some of the families I've been dealing with and helping them through that conversation that needs to happen to make their relationship better, is the shift we have to make. Because as parents, our function is to raise self-supporting, independent individuals.
Yes.
That's what we want, right? I remember a quote I saw in a house one time when I was visiting a farm family, and it said, we need to give our kids roots, and we need to give them wings.
Ooh.
And that's so true.
That's lovely.
So that's what we do. And so kids are born, obviously. They grow up, and as they grow, as parents, we try our best to shape them and to mold them and to help them grow as individuals. When they hit their teens, of course, they can become a problem. I shouldn't say that, but that's when kids really start seeking their own independence.
They're trying to spread those wings,
exactly.
right? Yeah.
And as parents, we want to try and control that, because we fool ourselves into thinking we have their best interests at heart. I shouldn't say fool ourselves, but that's really what we're thinking.
Yeah.
And so then the kids try to break free from that control. They want to be more independent. We try and just pull back on the reins to try and keep them, because we want them to be safe, right?
Yeah.
And so there's that relationship. And then when they become adults, young adults, and we want to have them involved in our farm or in our business, suddenly that relationship has to change.
Yeah.
Because how will I, as a parent, have a business relationship with my kids when I treat them as kids rather than as business partners?
Yes.
So that's, and it amazes me when I see successful farms, how they have been able to make that shift.
And they've obviously made that shift.
They have. They have to.
Yeah. I could just see that in being a child and knowing the different relationships. If that switch doesn't happen, that respect's not there, and you're going to continue to do this, right?
Absolutely.
So if you're doing this in the relationship, how is the farm going to grow and thrive and survive,
exactly,
right?
Exactly.
That makes a lot of sense.
Absolutely. And I think further to that, I think an added problem to that is that a lot of parents and kids have a certain dream. Parents are farming, the kids would like to take over the farm. But I've also run into situations where the parents feel like they have to give their farm to the kids.
Yeah.
And the kids feel like they're under this tremendous pressure that they have to take over the farm.
Oh.
And when you start looking at what their goals and interests are, they're not necessarily the same. And so when this pressure is on you, those relationships will just be more and more like that all the time. Wow. Because nobody's really where they want to be.
Expectations.
Exactly.
That aren't matching each other, right?
Exactly.
I couldn't imagine that if I was the child of farming parents and they wanted me to take over and I desperately wanted to go do something else. I could imagine that stress that you would feel, not to disappoint your parents.
Yeah.
What's going to happen? Maybe I'm the only child.
Yeah.
The farm's going to get sold. It's a 4-generation family farm. Wow.
You know, it's interesting. That reminds me of when I was going through my journey, which is a different topic. I went to see a psychologist, and when he found out that I wanted to sell the family farm, he was quite upset with me.
Oh.
And it was almost, how dare you? And so there's that outside pressure that comes, whether it's from inside of us or from outside, from other people,
Yeah.
that, well, yeah, of course, it's only natural that he or she's going to take over the farm, and then their kids are going to take over from them, and so on. And so we have this 4th, 5th, 6th generation type farm. And that puts undue pressure on mom and dad and the kids.
Yeah. Wow. Expectations.
Yes. And I read an article by a renowned, can't remember the name now, of course, in the States, who deals not with family farms, but with family businesses, so it includes other types of businesses. And he said, as professionals, which includes me, in the work I do, we have to understand the fact that not all families were meant to farm together. And it kind of hit me. But when I read through that article, it started making a lot of sense. And that perhaps sometimes, and again, this is on the negative side, right? That sometimes when I'm dealing with families and helping them try and mend these relationships and get on the same page so that they can be in business together, maybe I'm not doing them any favors.
Well, and that's interesting. I'm going to do a little segue here, but forgive me, I'd like to jump in with a little bit of that psychology. But if you look at it in life, normally you go out and you end up meeting somebody, and hopefully you meet somebody that's a good match for you, that you get along great, you have common interests, you are pulled together. Now, let's think about it in a farm family. There's different personalities, that family dynamic, and sometimes personalities just repel each other.
Absolutely.
And maybe you're right. I mean, you can work through it, but maybe some people aren't meant to.
Maybe some people aren't. Exactly. But again, there needs to be that conversation for them to discover what they really want, what are common interests and goals. And we have this model in conflict management, positions and interests it's called, right?
Okay.
And so each party, and let's use kids here and parents here, they have their positions they have, right? And so they're going at it in the public eye, as it were.
Yeah.
When underneath, which is invisible to everybody, they've got their individual wants, needs, fears, concerns, and hopes. And so they need to be able to start digging down and finding out what they are, to see whether they're even compatible, to see whether they actually want to be in business together.
Wow. And I don't know. I mean, I don't know what goes on at every family kitchen table, farming or not. But how many people actually have these discussions versus, I know what Tracy, the daughter, wants out of this. And I'm assuming mom and dad know, because obviously they know I love farming and I want to be here. Yeah. So we're all just assuming, and nobody actually stops, because communication is actually quite hard. And having those open, vulnerable, scary, we could feel that those are scary conversations. What if I say, right?
Absolutely. And I think far too often that honesty isn't there as kids are growing up, and as kids and the parents start making certain assumptions, that honesty isn't there. And then when push comes to shove and they actually start exploring this, it can turn ugly. And I remember you asking me the question, like when you got, like you said to me, if you get involved with these families, very often it's already in a sad state of affairs, right? Right. And what came to mind when you said that to me was a family I dealt with in the last couple of years, where when I first met with the family, I kind of sat there and I'm going, why do you need me? They were talking, they were laughing, they obviously had a great family relationship.
Okay.
But they just wanted to make sure that as the kids started taking over the farm, that those relationships could carry on. And so as we started meeting and people became more honest about what they wanted, suddenly the tension grew. In fact, I remember going home from one meeting and going, you know what? Instead of helping this family, I may be the cause of their breakup.
Oh boy.
But really what was happening, and what should have happened sooner, and does in a lot of cases, is they were finally starting to talk about things that I think a lot of them had wanted to talk about before, but just really never had the guts to do, perhaps.
Yeah. And then we let it simmer and simmer and simmer until
Yeah.
it's ready to boil over.
Yeah, exactly. In fact, you and I both like quotes.
Yeah.
I just read this week, I read one that said if someone lashes out at you in anger, you should probably listen because they're saying something they've wanted to say for a long time. And I just went, yeah. That's so true.
True, because we probably keep it in and keep it in, and then by the time you actually say something, you're so angry,
exactly,
and you finally let it out, and it's probably a bit blown out of proportion for that moment.
Exactly.
Wouldn't it be?
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Ooh, farm families.
Exactly. And very often.
Families.
Yes.
Yeah.
Very often the thing that sets off that, do I dare call it a passionate, heated moment, isn't necessarily the event that they're experiencing right then or the topic they're talking about. Rather, it's a buildup of things.
All those
right?
past.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. I've got this model I use in some of my presentations. It's called Anger Mountain.
Oh.
And you know what? It has the mountain, and it has various vulnerable points on it.
Okay.
Right? And so as human beings, we experience things in life, and so we become perhaps a little irritated. Then we experience something else, and we get even angrier. And finally we're getting, and it may be me driving down Kenniston in Winnipeg, and a driver does something to me that just totally, I blow a gasket. When it wasn't that driver, it was all these other life events that had frustrated me, but it just finally got to a breaking point.
That was the moment.
Yeah.
Ooh, I love this type of discussion. I should have been a therapist. Okay, so we're talking about all these dynamics that tend to happen, and let's not kid ourselves. It's not only farm families.
No.
It's families, it's relationships.
Absolutely.
It's two people coexisting, right? Two very different people.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But again, so how do you maintain, you have this familial relationship, that's a tough word for me.
Ooh.
Familial relationship that you've had for the last 20 years, let's say, and now you want to do a business relationship, which is a totally different type of relationship.
Yes.
So how, number one, do you keep them separate? And how are you successful with both of them? So it's this family first, business first type of, structure that you would like to have.
That would be a challenge.
Yeah.
Wow. And I mean, again, you probably work with families at the worst of it. Unfortunately, it would be amazing if we all said, hey, let's have a communication session and bring in an expert to facilitate us sharing all our deepest feelings, needs, and wants. But I imagine that doesn't happen too often.
No.
Okay.
And I'll give you an example. I had a phone call not that long ago from someone who's, I believe, in their early 50s. His parents were 80-ish.
Okay.
He had worked with his parents on the farm all his life. Now his parents were getting older, and he said, suddenly my siblings have woken to the fact that there's 3,000 acres of really expensive land here, and they want a piece of it. And he said, what do I do? He said, in fact, I don't even know if my parents have a will. Now I'm going into a different area. We don't have to go there. But so I said to him that you need to have a conversation. You need to get your parents, your siblings, yourself together in a room with the help of a professional and start talking about this.
Yeah.
And he says, okay, that sounds like a great idea. What do you charge? I told him what I charge. I thought, you know what, that first meeting, it probably cost him $500. I've never heard from him. So, because you go, oh, well, we can't pay that.
Right.
Well, excuse me, you have a multi-million-dollar farm, which is in jeopardy, and you can't afford that?
Yeah.
You can't afford not to.
Right.
And so far too often, like you say, when I get involved, it's sometimes so far down the road, it's tough to bring it back because there's so many hard feelings already involved.
And that's why I love these difficult conversations because, well, it's not necessarily fun to talk about this stuff, but I think the more that we share experiences that you've had, that we make this a conversation, that we go, geez, we should be talking, even if it just affects one person and affects their family farm, I think it's important.
Yeah.
And that's one of the reasons we do this show, to just open that can of worms and hopefully help our farmers, help them succeed.
Exactly.
So going back, and I mean, geez, we can make 10 episodes out of this. We talk about that paradigm shift. And you said that we do need to do that paradigm shift. We need to operate as a family and as a business. And I know when you were chatting about this, you were sharing some information, and it really sounded like a lot of the problems come from intergenerational differences. And I can think of so many, for example, with my grandparents, or you just observe people farming, and not even that, it's just common sense. Our great-grandfather, my great-grandfather is different from my grandfather, who's different from my parents, who's different from us, who would be different from our children. There's not one generation that's probably alike, and it'll never stay the same. So how do we expect, as very different beings, how do we expect to even be on the same page?
How do we adapt?
Yeah.
Exactly.
What's your thoughts on that?
Well, you know what, if we talk about them, and again, this is, I have to be very careful, because I did a presentation this winter where a young lady came up to me after and said, you know what, you really need to update your generational differences.
Okay.
And it wasn't as much a matter of updating it as the list, if you do research in it, is as long as you want it to be, right? And so I had just picked out a few, again, based on ones that I can relate to as a father,
Yes.
and ones that I can relate to because of families I work with. But people have different experiences. But for myself as a baby boomer, for my kids as, I think they're Gen Y probably, I see these differences. In fact, I sometimes say, and if my kids watch this, they're going to say, what? I would find it difficult to be in business with my kids because of some of these differences, right?
Yeah.
For myself, I will always question things, and if a decision has to be made, I'm going to question it, right? My kids, on the other hand, are much more confident. Like they just go.
Okay.
Right? Back when I was on the farm, I've changed somewhat now, and perhaps that's because I'm getting older and wiser. I would work to live. Sorry, I would live to work. That's what I would, workaholic 24/7, I need to work. The younger generation, on the other hand, no.
Yeah.
They want to punch out the clock. They want to punch out at 5 o'clock.
They want to punch out the clock too.
They have a much different view on life, and it's not just work.
Yeah.
So they actually work to live.
Yeah.
Right? And so I think going on holidays in the summertime when I'm busy on the farm and my kids want to go on holiday, and I ran into a family where the son said to dad, we're going wherever for a week in August. And his dad almost had a heart attack. What do you mean? Right?
Yeah.
Well, that's their attitude. That's dad's attitude. One family where the son finally went to dad and said, I'm not going to work any Sundays anymore. And his dad didn't like it, right? Because they have different goals in life. My kids want to retire as early as they can in life, right? Whereas baby boomers often say, if I retire, who am I? They lose their identity.
Yeah.
So there's that big shift in attitudes. And then again, where you have to try and get them to work together.
Yeah.
It's so difficult.
And there is such dramatic differences. I look at my grandfather. I didn't know my other grandfather. He passed away before I was born, but my grandfather that I know that farms, that's all he did. That's all he knew.
Yeah.
I remember hearing my mom and my aunties and uncles talk about the family vacation they took, where the next generation and our generation, it's the annual family vacation. And nothing, I'm no judgment here, but it's very different. And now if you're expecting those generations to work together, that is going to be massive.
Exactly.
Massive conflict.
Yeah.
Because one thinks the next generation doesn't care about the farm, is how they would see it, wouldn't they? Oh, they want Sundays off, they want holidays, they don't care about this farm.
Exactly.
I'm just guessing that's what it would be. And the younger generation, they would have their own narrative where, well, you know what, I want to spend more time with my family than ...
Exactly. And again, I realize when I look at a lot of the fathers that I deal with, look at myself, we had the wrong attitude about exactly that, right? It wasn't family first, it was business first. And that makes it difficult. But to shift from that to being more, you know what, I'm going to take the time off. The crop's going to come off anyway. That's a difficult shift.
Yeah. Well, and I don't know if it's, in my opinion, here we go, but I don't know if it's right or wrong either. And I think it's a generational, and I think it's a learning thing, right? I mean,
absolutely. It's not a matter of one is right and the other one wrong. Whichever
it's
side
different
you want
worlds,
to choose.
right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so again, it just boils down to, okay, if mom and dad want this and the kids want this, that's fine.
Yeah.
But let's have a conversation to see how we can all win in this.
Yeah. And I think you're jumping right into where I want to go next. We know there's big differences. How do we bridge that gap, and how do we prevent conflict?
You can't.
No? Okay,
No.
Episode over.
No.
Well, and I think you kind of touched on it.
But can I give you some examples?
Yes, please.
And this is from my own personal life.
I love examples.
Okay.
Yeah.
For example, I have a son and his wife and my grandkids that are in the process of selling a house and building a new house.
Okay.
They had to make financing arrangements. So he would phone Dad and he would want advice on, so how do I do this? And I said, well, what you need to do is get together with your banker and you need to ask these questions.
Yeah.
And this was at about 7 o'clock in the evening when me and him had this conversation. Half an hour later, he sends me a text and says, the banker says we have to do it this way. And I went, excuse me? And I phoned him. And I said, did you talk to the banker? No, I sent him a message on Facebook Messenger. And my era,
Yes.
you didn't arrange financing through Facebook Messenger.
When you say it, it sounds so funny.
Well, it's bizarre, and I can't believe. I mean, me and him have laughed about it since then, because guess what happened? He got it all arranged.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think he ever met with the banker. It was all done through Facebook Messenger and texting, right? Or emails, perhaps.
Absolutely.
But never that face-to-face conversation.
You know, and it's funny, I'm old enough to know the sit down with the banker, but I'm young enough to also, we text our banker and we do business. And sometimes I go, oh, I gotta go in to see the banker. Why can't we just sign papers? Like without seeing each other. So I'm right in the middle, and I relate over here, but I also do over here. But I do respect the fact that a face-to-face, a lot less misunderstandings, maybe more efficient, but over here, I get it. Yeah, I'm right down the middle on that. I see both sides. Yeah.
So it's interesting, and I've actually said it since I started taking note of this more, that I'm not sure I could be in business with my kids because I'm not, and it's not negative about them, it's probably way more negative about myself. Just the fact that I don't know if I could make that shift.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Bankers still have offices. They do, surprisingly.
And I do in my work. It just happened the other day. I had a mediation meeting where the client didn't want to go face to face with the person he needed to deal with.
Okay.
And so he wanted to do it by teleconference.
That takes some of the
Totally.
out of it, yeah.
Yes. There's not that, and I think it's to his own detriment.
Okay.
Now this is a large organization, so there's somewhat of a power struggle, and I think that's what scared him. But that's where that third person coming in and helping with the conversation helps balance out that power, right?
Right.
And so now you're doing it by phone. I think you lose a lot of that touch. You lose. We've talked about being authentic, right?
Do you have any more stories for us?
Well, you know what? Another funny one.
Okay.
I talked about baby boomers being always questioning things, right? And Gen Y kids being confident. This winter, one of my kids, they live in a house with a crawl space, and it was very, very cold, and they had a frozen water pipe. So I went there and helped them thaw it, and the next night, it was supposed to get really cold again.
Okay.
So my wife said, you should probably send him a text or give him a call and make sure that he's, making sure the pipe won't freeze again. And I said, no, he can make his own decision. Finally, I'm going, no, I better send him. So I sent him a text. I said, have you set up the heater in your crawl space? Sends back a text saying, nah, not necessary. I think another shot of tequila will do it. Right?
Okay.
Okay, fine. Screw you. But so then the next morning, guess what? My water pipe's frozen. So I sent a response. I said, have another tequila.
Oh, that got him good.
But knowing full, again, I mean, these are humorous things in my life which aren't life-changing events.
Right.
But I just sat there and I go, yeah, here we go again, right?
Yeah.
I would have done things differently than him. Now, if we were farming together and I show up and the water pipe is frozen because he didn't do what my expectation would have been because he would rather, who cares?
Right.
Well, it'll all work out.
Yes.
Well, suddenly that creates this friction again.
And I know so many people that farm intergenerational, that there is so many differences in the way you would do something to your son. Exactly. You would have showed up at the farm, the pipes were frozen. Now you would have had to spend the better part, let's say there were pipes at the farm, you would have had to spend the better part of the morning probably fixing it. You would have been frustrated, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And then, like you said, conflict.
Yeah. And again, families, and one of the big ones is mom and dad have this experience with farming. They know, equipment, for example, costs a lot of money, and so they're cautious and they don't want to overspend. Whereas the kids come along and they've got a lot more confidence in themselves, which is great. I had a lot more confidence when I was 25 years old.
Don't we all?
Yes,
Ignorance
exactly.
is bliss.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And so there's that control issue. And kids step in and they're so confident and they go, okay, let me manage this thing. And I've seen a situation, or more than one situation, where parents said, okay, go ahead. Well, 2 or 3 years later, they're in real financial trouble, right? Yeah. And the other extreme is dad just simply says, no way, you're not going to do that. And they carry on. And then the issue is that the relationships get broken the other way. So again, it's how to have that conversation.
Wow. So we want families to not end up at the point where they're seeing you in a negative situation. How I know we've given some examples. I wonder if you have some more for us where we can bridge the gap, prevent conflicts. What's your thoughts?
I don't know if we'll ever prevent conflict.
No.
And in fact, I often say that conflict actually, you can have constructive conflict rather than destructive conflict, right? And the name escapes me, writes a book called The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team.
Oh, I read it. Shoot, it's on my bookshelf at work.
Lencioni or whatever.
Patrick Lencioni. Yes, okay. Something like that.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And they talk about a base of trust, right?
Yes.
And so if there's not a trust between mom and dad and the kids, then the rest of it all falls to pieces. And yet if there's a solid base of trust, then you can have that conflict because you know that when that conflict comes to an end, a decision will have been made that everybody can live with.
Yes.
And probably 9 times out of 10 will be the best thing that business could do. And so it's important to be aware of that.
And I just caught a big boo-boo in what I said. Prevent conflict. You're so right, because constructive conflict, if we're not having conflict, what's the opposite? We're probably bottling it up, and then we have that resentment missed expectations. So
Exactly.
I caught a boo-boo in what I said.
And you know what? It's I don't know if it's a given, but it's been said that all of us inherently have one of 5 types of conflict management. And they are: we can avoid conflict,
Okay.
we can accommodate,
Okay.
we can compromise,
Okay.
we can compete, or we can collaborate. Depending on what your goals are, right? If you're just looking at goals, and that's what you're aiming for, and this is where I run into problems again with these confident kids, all they see is the goals, right? They want to take this thing over, they want to make $1 million, they want to retire, so they're very competitive. If you care about relationships, you may just be accommodating. So if I'm a dad,
Yes.
and I'm going,
Oh,
the
yes.
relationship with my kids is really important to me, so yeah, I'm going to let him take over the management. I'm going to let him take over these decisions. That's not healthy either.
I could see that.
And so if you're in a perfect relationship, if you're committed to goals and you're committed to relationships, you're going to collaborate, and it can work. But far too often, and no, sorry, before I say that, each individual has more of one type of that type of management than the others, right?
Okay.
And a prime example, my brother and I farmed together. I was far more accommodating and he was far more competitive.
Okay.
So that could very often lead to conflict as well, right?
Okay.
And so at best I could hope for was compromise, but there were times when we would really work together towards something and could collaborate, and that's much more healthier for farms.
Wow. That's such good examples that you just gave on how sometimes exactly maybe that younger generation's pushing competitive, wants the
Right.
top, and you could see how things can go bad.
Or mom and dad don't want to, or dad in particular. Moms are usually a little different. They're willing to, do more collaboration, but
The
if
harmony,
dad, yes,
yeah.
exactly. If dad doesn't want to let go, that's his goals, right? He's not concerned about relationships as much as he is about his goals, so he doesn't want to let go.
Yeah.
So it can happen there as well.
Wow.
But that's why very often it's, and this one family I dealt with, it really happened where I said to them, okay, you guys, what you need to do is pick your battles. Like, and they had a conflict about one thing, I can't even remember what it was, but I said, so is that really the hill you want to die on? Well, no, it's not that important. So why don't you let go? And so sometimes it's better to avoid or to accommodate. So again, you got to try and find that balance.
Wow. This is a tough one. I want to put those worms back in the can now. It's just so challenging. But I'm happy we're having these conversations because they're important, right? And the perspective that you have on different generations, even for our audience, if they're hearing that, going, "Oh, my parents might be feeling this.
Yeah.
Am I being that? Oh, I did. Oh, right? Those takeaways."
Exactly, and that actually segues into how can we deal with this?
Yes.
One of the best tricks I know to have in your mind when you're arguing, whether it's you and your husband, whether it's me and my kids, me and my wife, whether it's you and your employees, I challenge people to take a third person approach.
Okay.
And what that is, Tracy, is how often when you see maybe your mom and dad argue, or you see your neighbors argue, you're sitting and looking in from the outside, and you go, well, that's so simple, right? Why are they raising their voice? They don't need to be fighting. It's not, I wish I could give them advice. Next time you're having an issue and there's an argument that ensues, sometimes, in fact, when I started practicing this at home with my wife, is I would actually say, okay, you know what, let's take a break. And I would walk away from it and I would think about it. Okay, what's the point I'm trying to push? What's she trying to push? Right? And try and find, okay, so I'm saying, why am I saying this? and get to the point where I get an understanding of why the conflict is actually happening, then we can start again, because now we can just head towards resolution of this.
Smart.
And if you actually practice that, I do this sometimes now, whether it's in mediation meetings, whether it's in my own personal life, I will, while I'm having this conflict with someone, I'll be thinking about that in my mind as we're having the discussion.
Being that third person?
Right, looking in at this particular conflict that's happening and going, well, if I was that third person looking in, what advice would I give those two?
Yeah.
And it's amazing how that works, because, well, you know what we do? We listen to reply rather than to understand.
Right.
There's another quote for you.
Yes.
So instead of listening to reply, in fact, someone says, and now I'm talking about communication actually, effective communicators listen more than they talk. So if we're dealing in conflict or dealing with things we don't agree with someone else, if we take the time to listen to what they're actually saying. But a lot of us think that if we listen too closely to someone, they may think we're agreeing with them. That's not the case. We need to listen to understand, and when we can start understanding each other. In fact, my mediations, whether it's farm debt, whether it's any mediation I do, I will tell people at the outset, we're going to start talking about this, and this isn't to find out who's right and who's wrong. This is to understand where each person is coming from.
Okay.
And once we have that understanding, it's much easier to find common ground and be able to have a good conversation about what we need to have a conversation about.
Being the third person.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Jeez. You know what? It's a little tangent here. Sometimes I wish we were all taught this a bit more.
Yeah.
Wherever that might be, communication is the most important thing in the world. And I don't know about you, but I didn't learn a whole heck of a lot on communication, wherever that might be. You just have to learn as a professional, right?
Yeah.
That just frustrates me to no end.
And that's why I will often tell clients, particularly families that are moving into being in business together, the best thing they could do is go take some workshops at a place called Mediation Services in Winnipeg.
Okay.
So they have Introduction to Conflict Resolution, which gives you some basic ideas on why people do what they do and why conflict happens. They have, effective communication workshops. If families would all, before they even start the conversation, go take 2 or 3 of these workshops, that they would find a much easier way to having their family first, business first business.
Wow. I agree completely.
Yeah.
And I think you just gave us one resource right there, and that's what I wanted to ask you about too. Do you have any tips, tools, resources for people that are sitting there going, oh my gosh, I have conflict on the farm and we're not dealing with it healthy? Where do I learn this kind of stuff?
Well, like I said, those workshops can be priceless, and I know some families that actually did it before they started the conversation.
Okay.
And they had a much better conversation because of it.
Right on.
Other than that, you know what, it all depends on what kind of personalities you have. You can do a personality assessment online. It's called a DISC personality assessment. There's all kinds of tools you can use. But again, refer back to the stress management stuff we talked about. Self-awareness. Who am I in this relationship? How am I treating this relationship? Am I being respectful? Am I listening? All of these things, and it's a learning experience.
Isn't it? And probably a lifelong.
Exactly.
I have learned so much of this stuff to try and improve my business, myself, communicating, being a boss, being a better spouse. And awareness is key, right? If I wasn't fully aware of my extrovert tendencies and how introverts operate, wow.
Yeah.
That would be a different relationship that I have with a lot of the people that I love, right?
Yeah.
And oh my goodness, you can just continue to learn all this stuff forever and ever, amen.
And we have to continue learning
Yes, true
until
enough.
we reach perfection. And again, I'm not going there.
Oh, shoot. That is another episode.
Exactly.
So you mentioned, and I mean, there's so many books out there about communications. You're right, personality styles. I was, so many times when we've been talking, I was going to pipe up and say, well, it depends if you're an introvert or an extrovert in a relationship. That adds another layer.
Absolutely.
Right? Because an introvert wants to process, wants to probably step away, where an extrovert is ready to talk on the dime.
Yeah.
And will be a little more vocal, where we have different needs. Now add that to communication in a farm family. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, exactly. Totally.
That's a few different layers.
And it's interesting. When we had kids, we had 3 kids.
Okay.
The first one came along, and you go, okay, this isn't bad. Second one came along, and you treat them the same as the first one, and suddenly you're in for a rude awakening. Right? No, they are different.
Yeah.
Right? And so they have to be handled differently. And so the first 2 were sons.
Okay.
Third one was a daughter. Well, that's a whole new,
True.
So you can't assume that all of us are the same, because we're not. We're all different.
Yeah.
We're all unique.
Which is a good thing.
Absolutely. Can you imagine? Let's not go there.
I was going to say a whole nother episode. So that is great stuff that we just spoke about. And I think our audience is going to get a lot of value about that. There's probably a lot of people sitting at home going, oh my goodness, I thought it was just our farm. I thought it was just my dad that didn't respect me, or my son that just is this, or daughter, whatever the case is. And that is why I love this show and bringing on people like you with your expertise and your knowledge to just bring those ideas to our audience. You're not alone. Other farm operations go through this.
Exactly.
This is why we go through this. This is where you can go to learn more. And again, at the end of the day, our goal on our show aligns with your goal and the professionals we interview. We want to help farmers succeed, right?
Yeah,
And
exactly.
these ideas, conflict, if we can have healthy conflict and manage those intergenerational differences, I think we are going to be 10 steps closer to a healthy family farm.
Keeping in mind that what I would envision as success might actually not be the best turnout that I could have. Isn't
Yes.
necessarily success. It's just what I perceive could be successful. But when we start melding ideas, that might change.
True.
And so keep an open mind. And again, never ever hesitate to seek the help of a professional.
You know, I wish we all did.